When I was a couple weeks short of my 70th birthday, I started thinking about my mother's mother, who lived to be 100, and her mother, who lived to be 102, and my father, who lived to be 90. I began to think that maybe our generation could be the first to routinely live to be 100. When I talked about this at family dinner one night, my granddaughter, who was 5, said,
"What are you going to do for the next 30 years, Grandpa?"
Hello, I'm Dr. Janet Price.
And I'm Gregg Kaloust. And we are Oldish. And this is our podcast, Oldish.
If you're oldish or know someone who is, please join us for conversations amongst ourselves
And our special guests
about what it means to be oldish in the 21st century.
If you ever wonder whether you're getting old, you're oldish. What are you going to do for the next 30 minutes?
Hi, I'm Janet, and I'm oldish.
Hi, I'm Gregg, and I'm oldish. And we're glad to welcome to this episode of the podcast, Oldish Conversations on Aging in the 21st Century, our friend Steve Raymond, who has a background as a nurse in issues of aging and elder care and dying and grieving, as well as many years' experience as a martial artist that he brings to his practice. And in his oldishness, one of the things that he's doing is becoming a pickleball coach, which is why we know him. I met him on the pickleball courts. He has done a lot of thinking in his coaching about the issues of proper preparation before playing and injury prevention and that sort of thing. So we're glad to welcome Steve to our podcast today, and we're looking forward to a pleasant conversation.
Thank you, Gregg. Thank you, Janet.
We've been talking about your specific reason for wanting to come on and talk with us today, and I know that it's part of your coaching practice, but if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit before we get into that about how you got here and why the questions that you're going to address today have a particular importance, I think that would be helpful.
Well, I think like so many people, pickleball I discovered almost by happenstance. I just happened to stumble into it one day. I was like, what is this game these people are playing? And they invited me in. And from day one, I was an instant addict. And I had never played tennis, but I was a fairly decent table tennis player. So I brought that to it. And I've done lots of different sports throughout my life. I was a pretty well accomplished martial artist when I was younger, and basketball and skiing, things I've trained at progressively and things that I taught progressively over a number of years. And so having spent a lifetime in healthcare, starting as a 22-year-old person, and now I'm 70. And, so you have a different perspective as you age into being a senior yourself and seeing what happens, having spent my life seeing all the varying forms of that aging can manifest itself, from people having very intense diseases of civilization is what I call it, even at relatively younger ages, and other people who they're 96 years old and they've outlived all their friends and half the people around them, and all the varieties in between. Working in senior care for 25 years, the first thing that caught my attention, because I'd worked with so many families and patients with the painful experience of dementia, which can really be, it's just such a challenging diagnosis for people to contend with, because it tends to wind itself out over many years, a long time of caregiving and progressive debility. And I had a couple of experiences of taking note of my own cognitive changes, and enough because I'd had so much experience with it. I was like, there are few experiences that I'd had a few years ago that caught enough of my attention to say, whoa, what's happening with me here? Because I'm not naive about any of this stuff. And I started really looking at, instead of being on the treatment side of cognitive health, I want to be on the optimization side of cognitive health. And what are the steps, the lifestyle steps that we can take to promote optimal brain health? I had the fantastic experience of meeting an elder statesman neuroscientist and interviewing him in a 45-minute television show, Michael Merzenich. Mike won the $1 Million Kavli Award for his discoveries about neuroplasticity, which is to say that a form of thinking that has been overturned was previously it was thought that we were born with all the brain cells and all the connections we're ever going to have. And then it's basically attrition over the years. And the ones that develop dementia, they've suffered more attrition than others of us that may not have. He, through his work with developing the cochlear implant, he discovered the concept of neuroplasticity, that even at our age as oldish people, we can develop new brain cells, we can develop new connections, and it's based upon the stimulus that we provide to our brains. So he was incredibly kind to me after the interview. He invited my partner Jill and I to his home in Napa Valley, and we spent a lot of time with him. And he really wanted to, he was being an elder sage, downloading his wisdom to a younger man because he knew I would do something with it. And he was showing me how he, as a neuroscientist, lives his life. And this guy's an incredibly salt of the earth person. You know, he's from a small town in Earth. He would fit comfortably in any setting. And yet he's an incredible genius and has a few hundred scientific articles, peer-reviewed articles published, and he has multiple patents of many biomedical devices. And so he brought me to give me this that I could take forward. And we talked about pickleball and table tennis and all that. Now, he developed a program, a cognitive, computerized cognitive training program called Brain HQ. And when what led me to meet him was I worked with that Brain HQ program, and I had very positive results from it. I had started speaking publicly about my own, because I'm big about, if we can't talk about things, we can't manage them. I am totally about breaking away the stigma from anybody talking about anything that's bothering them. If it's cognitive health, we have to talk about it so we can manage it. If it's a man is having prostate issues, we have to talk about it so we can manage it. Take all the shame out of all this stuff. I don't want any shame. I reject it. I reject it as a paradigm. And just talk about it, because that's how we get to address things in a positive, proactive way. So I experienced many positive benefits from his Brain HQ program. My goal in pickleball coaching is to adapt what he did with a lot of the methodologies and theories that he used in computerized cognitive training and bring it into the three-dimensional world of the pickleball court. Now, he had also worked with Tom Brady on Tom Brady's TB12 program. And so there's a lot of the concepts that apply to, say, what a quarterback has to do on a football field can, in terms of his brain function, in terms of how he sees the field, in terms of visual processing speed, in terms of reflex speed, that all those things are very trainable. And Gregg and Janet, people our age, there's specific things that we can do to speed up our reflexes, speed up our visual processing. And so I bring that into my coaching practice. His name is Michael Merzenich. Listeners should take a look at his Wikipedia page, Merzenich, and also look at brainhq.com.
I wanted to highlight a couple of things you said that I think are so critical. Rejecting shame just as a construct, I think, as always, and especially at this time in our lives, to be able to, you talked about breaking stigma. I think it's such a big part of many people's experience at this time in their lives. So I just wanted to highlight that and just kind of thank you for saying that, because I think it's really important. Also, at some point while we're talking today, I'd like to hear more about how your experience over those 25 years of working as an RN and these moments or these scenarios where so many people were in the process of dying, and what that has meant to you as an individual as you're aging. You said you're certainly comfortable with it, and it's as familiar probably as it could be. And so I just wondered, because you were younger then and now you're 70. So I just wondered what that's like.
Yeah. And that's a really good question. And it's one I think about because, we're all at the age where even though we're all hoping to live a longer age, we've all had friends have things happen to them at a younger age. I have, in our pickleball community right now, we just suffered a loss of a dear beloved woman. Oh my God. She's, so fantastic but only 63. And, her husband's a fellow RN and she was a much loved part of our community. And then I have another friend with glioblastoma right now. And then one of my old martial arts friends who is an incredible pillar of the community in Maine. A lot of people would know who this man is. His name is John Jenkins, and he was an African-American Bates graduate who was the mayor of Lewiston and the mayor of Auburn and a state senator. And he died a premature death at age 68. And this guy was one of the healthiest human beings and strongest human beings I've ever known personally. And he was on the world karate team, traveling all over the world. And, we trained together younger. So none of this stuff I take cavalierly at all. And my heart and mind were cracked open by my decades of experience of working intimately with people at sensitive times in their lives. And I always held that as my mission as a nurse. In my acute care hospital days, I always felt that right from my very first experience with death and dying as a nursing student, that my purpose there, my sense of purpose was to be a humane, compassionate, reassuring, calming, loving individual to people in extremes of duress in their life. That was the whole sense of purpose I gathered out of it. Then I spent the 7 years that I mentioned to you previously working in AIDS units in Los Angeles, and hundreds of people dying during that 7 years because I started early on in that epidemic. And by the time I left was when the protease inhibitors were first coming out and people started to live longer. So I find it impossible for me to imagine who I as a man would be in life had I not made the almost happenstance decision to become an RN. It was so weird. I took a 50-hour course in first aid and had been working on construction. And then one of my friends happened to be an RN. And I was like, I think nursing school sounds really interesting. I think I'd like to do that. Little did I know how transformative it would be and how I always think it's cavalier for people to predict how they will react in a given situation regarding their own death or their own decline in life. I don't make predictions for myself. I hope that I approach it like this, which means I'm hoping I approach it with openness and not closed offness. That's my main hope. And that's what I always hope for people as they enter difficult times of their lives too.
Yes. And I also would say, because I know you're going to jump in and tell us more about what you're doing now. I loved what you just said about the transformative, how decisions can be transformative. And I feel like that sounds like a theme in your life, and that now the pickleball coaching sounds like it's come from a decision, or it's a decision that has created some transformative experiences in your life, which I'm saying partly because that's fantastic for all of us, everyone listening who's oldish, that as you said about, our brain development and how that continues on throughout our life, transformative decisions can happen throughout our life, including when we're oldish.
Good point. Yeah, it's interesting because on the one hand, in the meta picture of things, given the state of our world, like pickleball coach, really? That's what you want to do? Be a pickleball coach? But you know what? I'm loving it. And it gives me an opportunity to be with people in such a positive way and to, I have a lot to share. And plus I recognize in myself, I definitely as a 70-year-old man. My game as a player, and I love playing and I love competing and all that, and I love the community, but my game will top out somewhere. You make a certain amount of progress, but my ability as a coach already exceeds my ability as a player. And I have far more growth potential as a coach, because I'm a constant student of things. Once I get into them, I just keep at it. It's continuous quality improvement. So, actually being a coach is good for my own brain health. It keeps me in the game that I love, and it keeps me engaged with people, and it keeps me learning and growing. And they're two very different skill sets. Playing and coaching you can have a fantastic player, but they may not be a great coach, or you can have someone like me who's a pretty, I'm a decent player, but I'm a far better coach than I'll ever be a player.
Well, you're a pretty good player. I can tell you that. And I've seen you across the courts as you were engaged with people in your coaching business. And I could tell from your approach to that you're also very good at that. And I've played with some of your students after they became your students, and very quickly they were playing like they knew what they were doing, more so than before. So I could see your influence in there. So I know for a fact that you're pretty good. You said something a couple of different times, the approaching things with an open heart. And you talked about your experience as a nurse of cracking your heart and your head open. And those things are key. Are you familiar with Pema Chodron?
Yes. And I had a lovely weekend in her, right here in Maine, as a matter of fact. I spent a lovely weekend with her.
Well, good.
Years ago.
I spent the weekend with her at one of her retreats in Vermont a couple of years ago. Yeah. And she's been, the last few years, she's shifted her focus a little bit. So she talks about end of life. She's in her mid-80s now, and she's been thinking about and looking at end of life stuff quite a bit. And she has been talking a lot about the approach to the end of life is the way that you should approach the life that you're having now, which is with an open heart, and welcome all of it in, because it's all part of life. And it's as a human being, this is what we have. And so rather than fight against it, just welcome it all in. So when you were talking like that, it reminded me of some things that I've heard Pema say. So I just wanted to check in to see whether you'd heard that. And I did want to throw out one more thing about the people that you mentioned that in our pickleball community, where a young woman just passed away. She and her husband were the first. I played with them in the first game that I ever played in Brunswick when I started playing down there a couple of years ago. And I'll never forget how kind they were to me, because I was terrified when I got there. I talked about it in an earlier podcast. It's like, it's a 40-minute drive for me. And I was worked into a state of near terror by the time that I got there, and I could hardly pick up a paddle. And they were just totally kind to me. They welcomed me. They taught me what the local rules are, where to put your paddle down and so on. And they joked with me. And when I missed a shot, they didn't give me a hard time. I played with him the other day. And as you can imagine, he's having a pretty hard time of it, but there he was playing and being kind to the people we're playing with.
Yes.
So very special people.
He's beautiful that way. She was always beautiful that way. I loved both of them. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
They're the best, as we say here in Maine, Janet.
The finest kind.
Yeah. The finest kind. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
talk to us a little bit about something that you'd also had mentioned, and it's actually one of the reasons that we wanted to talk to you today. Was a lot of us, for all the reasons that you mentioned, are playing pickleball as a continuation of life. I think pickleball is a huge metaphor for life. Every way that you would want to live, you can live on the court.
Yeah.
But so many of the players, and I think this skewed a little bit in my experience, because I like to play in the morning, and I like to play open play. And who's playing open play in the morning for the most part is retired people. So, you're talking about people who are oldish, and people are constantly talking about worry. They either just were injured, or they saw somebody get injured, or they're afraid to get injured. And nonetheless, they continue to start off their day of play with 5 dinks, and I'm good. Among other things, I mean, just those 5 dinks down there where we play, people always warm up with dinks, but they never dink in the game. And it's not, never is an overstatement. But nobody ever warms up their serve. Nobody practices an overhead to loosen up their shoulders. So we'd like to hear you talk a little bit about taking a little bit of the worry about injury out of the game. And there are ways to do that. And I know that you know what they are.
Yeah. Well, let me address both sides of the paradox of pickleball, which is a phrase I just now made up. Paradox of pickleball.
I like it. We're going to steal that.
So on the one side, so I went to the Nationals in November out in the Palm Desert area, and I wanted to see the bigger picture. It was the first time I'd ever been to a pro tournament, and it really opened up my eyes to the world of the senior players from all over the country. And I wanted to see the young pros, but really it was the senior players. And because I'm a gregarious sort of person, I met pickleball legend in the grandstands. Guardian angels or happenstance, however it occurred, but we were chatting and then she liked what I was saying. So she opened up to me. Well, it turned out she had been, she's 76 years old. She's the legendary Fran Myer. She was in Washington State. First of all, she was the pickleball seniors coordinator for the Seattle, then for the entire state of Washington. Then she and her husband organized the first national pickleball tournament. Now, did you ever hear of anything like the Pickleball Hall of Fame? I never heard of a Pickleball Hall of Fame. Well, she's in the Pickleball Hall of Fame, and she invited me to the Pickleball Hall of Fame dinner. And now, so I'm in this dinner of all these oldish timers they've been playing pickleball for decades. I was like, wow. And these people love each other and they have these long, long friendships. And I was like, man, this is what it is about. It's not about, did you win this match or did you slam the ball against that lady that just doesn't have the mobility, but you were heartless with her anyway. And it's about the friendships and it's about the joy and the emotional resilience that it cultivates and the connection and the love that you develop for people over time. And I always say, if I'm lucky and if you're lucky, we're going to get to play thousands more games in our lives and we're going to have tons of friends that we've evolved over the years, and we're going to have different drill partners and different people that we play with. And that's what it's about, And when I'm playing, I play to win. Like an open rec play, I don't try so hard, so much depending, I calibrate myself, but I like playing with advanced groups too. And I like, quote, playing against people better than me. And so all that now, so Fran Myer introduced me to Dr. Ernie Medina, who is a PhD in public health, and he's a professor at Loma Linda University. And so I interviewed him out there at the Nationals. And so his line, which I borrow and shamelessly use because it's the fantastic line, pickleball is a primary public health intervention. And I did the PubMed and I did the search, and there's already tons of studies out there about the health benefits of pickleball. And Ernie Medina convinced Loma Linda University, they have the Drayson Senior Wellness Center. He convinced them to build 26 pickleball courts for their wellness center. And his 80-year-old mom was out there competing in the 3.0 80 plus division in pickleball, So I had my eyes opened wide by Michael Merzenich, by these folks here, and it kind of lit something underneath me that said, this is how I want to spend this part of my life. I want to teach pickleball. I want to coach it. I want to take my background in healthcare and apply it to pickleball. I want to take what I'm learning about the neuroscience aspects and apply it to my coaching style. Coaching senior pickleball players is not the same as coaching younger players. There's things that really should be done that I'm not seeing addressed in any of the professional associations, but I have a very clear sense of what those things can be and should be. And that moves me over to the other side of the paradox, because a paradox always has two sides, right? So we got primary public health intervention. It's good for you. It'll keep your heart going. It'll promote all your health in so many ways and prevent type 2 diabetes and all that, which, by the way, the gateway to too many other diseases. None of us wants type 2 diabetes if we can avoid it. Now, the other side of the paradox is, so there was a study published in the Journal of Emergency Medicine from a few years ago, looking at 19,000 pickleball injuries in a single year. So ER visits. Now that's just the ER visits. So you can know that there's lots of other injuries that occur that never made it to an ER, but the person's, doctoring it themselves or doing whatever. Kind of like COVID now. There's tens of thousands of COVID cases that never get identified. So 19,000 cases they looked at, 90% of the injuries were in people 50 or older. I'm like, wow. And just right now, Gregg, in our group, we have, people that I care about, people that I feel close to, that I like very much. And like, oh, she's got a pulled hamstring and this other person has a torn Achilles. And my sister in Manchester, New Hampshire, she's like, oh my God, one of my friends just fell and broke her wrist. And I personally know 5 people right now with pickleball injuries. And then over the few years I've been playing, you see them happen, So I am really about taking my karate background, which I, trained for years, and basketball training and skiing training. And all those are sports that I trained at progressively over years. So it wasn't I went out and tried it. I competed very successfully at karate for a lot of years at the black belt level. So how does a senior develop the right kind of strength so that they can be in a stable, safe position when they're striking the ball? How do they move around the court so that they are in a stable position as they're moving around the court? Something I refer to as prowling, because pickleball is a game that is played low. It's not, you're not standing upright. It's best played when you're low. And so if you learn so what I'm trying to coach with people is moving in a certain way. And it's always about eye, foot, hand coordination, so that your first step is to, like when you see all those players they're always in the right spot, right? Well, the reason they're in the right spot is they quickly anticipated where the ball was going, and they've trained enough so that they position themselves to where they're meeting the bounce of the ball in a good position to use the stroke they practice thousands of times. That's why they look so good, and that's why they look so effortless. So I've been going up to Bangor and training with the fantastic Lisa Pulsick, who is one of the original founding members of IPTPA, and she's a tennis pro, past tennis pro, and a past pickleball pro. So I go up to Bangor to train with her on coaching. How do you coach this game? And her assistant, George Roulette, they're both fantastic players, fantastic coaches. So really trying to take the coaching knowledge that they're giving to me, but then specialize it towards the oldish players, because that's where my head is at. I'm happy to be working with someone who's yesterday, just with a delightful woman. She's 80 years old. She's not moving around a lot, but for the movement that she's doing, she can move around pretty well. And on the other hand, in my last class, I had an 81-year-old woman. I couldn't believe how elegant and graceful she was. Like, goddess, I want to be you. 11 years from now, I want to be moving like you. She's so fantastic. So it's like, if people learn how to play the game a certain way, then just playing the game will make you stronger so that you can play it more safely. But you can't just do that. You have to do a few specific things that really don't take a lot of energy, and it's not going out lifting big weights. It's basically body weight exercises, but you have to take care of your shoulders. You have to take care of your spine. You have to take care of your rotational forces in your torso. You have to take care of your lumbar. You have to take care of the strength in your legs, hamstrings, quads, the anterior tibials, the calves, the lateral movement, ankles and feet, strengthening your feet. And these things can be done almost casually. And that's kind of where I'm at. There's things that I do that are, quote, exercises that I think of it as like flossing my teeth. It's like, well, this is what I'm doing, A, to support my pickleball game, but B, because I've seen what happens to people who don't support the strength of their musculoskeletal architecture as they age, and then sarcopenia, which means the loss of muscle, and then osteopenia, which is people getting a softening, osteoporosis, getting a softening of the bones. Matter of fact, I'm going to call out my partner, Jill. Something fantastic she did was she increased her bone density by 20% over about an 8-year period. Now, without taking Fosamax. Matter of fact, she rejected it because she didn't want to take Fosamax, but she just started, she's a person who's a gardener, and she would go to the gym and she's lifting weights and she was doing things. So I'm kind of like, Bluto, and she's kind of like olive oil. I mean, she's a very thin, slender person. She's not building big muscles, but she has that strong architectural strength that allows her to be strong and stable and enjoy her life. If we're lucky, if all of us are lucky, we will keep our function for up until at least the last year of our life or so. But if we ignore it, and especially if we haven't had an athletic life, or especially like another focus for my main CDC colleagues who I love, and they're all working from desks, and for people that work in offices in general, that's another interest of mine, where what kinds of exercises can you do from your desk that will keep you going so you can just stand up for a few minutes? It's like, what do we do to make ourselves strong enough without having to spend hours in the gym, to play the game safely and keep having fun, and to age in a way that is healthy and keeps us going to towards whatever end that we have in the future.
You're here to that. Could you maybe share with us something like a 5-minute routine to do before you step on the court in whenever
Yes.
you go to play rec ball?
Sure. Interestingly, you caught me at a time where one of my pickleball friends, Scott Logan, who's a professional videographer, he and I are going into the Landing YMCA gym, and we're going to be recording exactly this, just making a brief video that I'm going to post up on Facebook for all our friends that are local. But so minimally for me, so when you talked about warming up before, like those are pickleball warm-ups. When I talk about warming up, I'm talking about warming up my body. So here's a pro tip. Whenever I'm on my way to play pickleball, I have my seat heater on to bring blood to my spine and lumbar muscles and back muscles and my hamstrings, so that there's already some blood flow going there. That I do. I don't care if it's summer. I use my seat heater because I want to engage that blood flow. I will do some air squats, which just kind of up and downs to get blood flowing to my quadriceps muscles. A hip hinge exercise is hard to describe. I can't really describe it because it looks similar to a squat, but you do it differently, but it works your hamstrings and brings blood flow to the hamstrings. And by the way, I want to make another point, because sometimes you'll see people so I'm the kind of as a martial artist, I was a kicking specialist. I used to be able to do a full split. Full split. I could put my legs on a couple stools and go like that. I still have pretty good natural flexibility, but you don't stretch to warm up. You warm up to stretch. And especially as we're older, you don't just throw your leg up on a chair and just start stretching and that's going to warm you up. That's not warming up. Warming up is doing movement to get blood flowing to your back, to your legs. I will grip the ground with my feet, like literally grip with my toes. I will do some lateral movements. I will do some hip rotations, lift one leg around, do some hip rotations. I always take care of my shoulders, doing shoulder rolls. So I'm going to put that video up in the Mid-Coast Maine Pines thing within a couple weeks. And so to my thinking, anybody our age should you need to warm up your body. That's all. Now those particular exercises, they're good for aging and they're good for the game. That's simple as that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Early on, when I started playing pickleball about 4 years ago, I went to a clinic and the gentleman who put on the clinic wouldn't do anything until he took the class through some warm-ups and some stretches. And he made a point that I hadn't heard before because I stopped being an athlete in organized sports back in college. And after that, I've been an athlete my whole life, but not with coaches and doing it on purpose, so to speak. And he used a term that I hadn't heard before, which was dynamic stretching, which is stretching while moving. So you're moving, you're warming up, and you're loosening up at the same time. And since then, there are a couple of people who I pay attention to on YouTube and podcasting, Tony Roig and CJ Johnson. And they talk a lot about warming up, and they talk about dynamic stretching before you play, static stretching, with you see people leaning on a fence and stretching a hamstring. Do that after you play to make sure that things don't snap back on you, after you play. So I've been doing that more or less religiously. I don't always do the stretching afterwards, but unless people are begging me to get on the court, when I arrive at the courts in the morning, I'm not doing anything until I've done a whole bunch of leg stretches and I twist my torso and flip my arms around for some shoulder stuff. I just don't want to go on the court because I've seen people, a lot of times people get hurt because they're tight and they make a sudden move. There's a lot of sudden moving in pickleball, and you make a sudden move and there's something in the course of that move, some part of your body is tight, it's going to get yanked and that hurts.
Yeah, it's tight. So I pretty much always do a lot of warm up before I even go to the court. So I'll do it at home before I get in the car. I have the seat heater on, then I get there and I'm already pretty well warmed up. But even then I like to do something at the court. And then I also do a lot of if someone were watching me play, they would appear to be extraneous movements, but especially in the first couple games, like, when I'm waiting for my partner to serve or waiting for someone else to serve, or I'm doing a lot of different kinds of motions to get my motor running, especially like my shoulders and my back, and I'll do the air squats. I'm just doing a lot of that on the court. And kind of one of my jokes is, Ben Johnson is notorious for being a slow starter. I'm a slow starter too. So, Ben Johnson and I have that in common. We're both slow starters. I always figure out
that may be it though.
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, that's about it. But my motor doesn't really get running until I have 2 games in me. And then I start feeling like, okay, now I'm in it. So in that first couple games, I'll try to take it a little easy. I'm not going to go really pushing myself too hard in that first couple games. I don't want a pulled hamstring. There was a point I was going to make before. Who really injures themselves? And I did this when I first started playing pickleball. If you have someone who is previously athletic, but they've been sedentary for a while, and then you bring them out on the pickleball court, and pickleball feels pretty easy. It doesn't feel that hard when you first get out there. Yeah, I got a wicked hamstring injury in my first 6 weeks of playing pickleball. I had this massive bruise on the back of my leg, and that put me out for 6 weeks before I could play again. So I'm always like, if you have that previous athletic background, be mindful as you're coming into it, People that don't have that background, and interestingly, they may not hurt themselves as much, especially in the beginning.
Do you have any recommendations for our listeners about where they could see some of what you're talking about? Both your own video that you're going to make and or other sites?
One YouTube person who's doing excellent stuff around movement is a guy named Tom Morrison. I would just search for him. He's doing excellent work around movement. And do a search for, especially if you are coming out of a sedentary life, do a search on YouTube for movements for sedentary workers. So like people that work at a desk. Do that search. I just did that one the other day, and just out of curiosity to see what's there. There's a ton of good stuff on there. In my own personal life, I'm sure if I were to sit down to myself and just make an inventory of all the things I do, there's way more than 100 different sorts of things that I just do. Like I said, it's like flossing my teeth. I'll tell you one final funny thing. I actually got to meet Jack LaLanne, and I got to meet him on his 70th birthday when in Long Beach Harbor for his 70th birthday. He always did these publicity things. So on his 70th birthday, he towed, swimming in the water in the Long Beach Harbor, row of 70 dinghies with people in the dinghies. 70. And
Wow.
he swam for a mile. And I got to shake his hand after. And so this was an 84. Yeah, I was probably 84. And so at that age, how old was I? I was 31 years old. And I got to shake his hand, and he was just, an ebullient, happy guy. And so now I'm his age when he did that. Now, I can assure you, I am no Jack LaLanne. That guy lived to 96. He was active right till the day he died. But here's my thing about health. You hit enough of the right check boxes, you're going to be okay. If you don't get one of those unfortunate things that happens to our friends sometimes, and, but if you hit enough of the good, healthy check boxes and avoid enough of the bad, obviously unhealthy check boxes, and much of it's about inflammation and diet, and also super important, quality of sleep. Way, way important for us as oldish people. So I'll leave it at that. We can do this. We can do this. Hit enough of the good boxes, avoid enough of the bad boxes, enjoy your life, love your friends, be kind to people, be a good sport on the pickleball court, and don't slam it to people that you're better than. It's good for all of us.
Thank you for that one. Because that's a key one. I know a lot of people that just, they don't want to play because they're afraid that somebody's going to hurt them. And there's no reason for it. There's no reason.
Yeah.
I never slam the ball at anybody, because why? Once in a while I'll accidentally, somebody will get hit, but not because I was slamming it at them.
Yeah.
Some people think, oh, well, they can't hit it back if I hit them first.
Well, if it's Joel or Nate or Rick, I'm going to slam it at them for sure. But
yeah,
it's a joke.
Yeah. Yes. But they expect it.
They want it.
Well, when they're playing with me, they're actually quite surprised when the ball comes back at them. There's a couple of things I want to throw out a thing about. I think it was CJ Johnson. I heard this from the first time. For so many people that I've played with who are oldish, they think of themselves as somebody who's oldish, who's playing pickleball, and they're out there playing pickleball without realizing that they're athletes. And, an athlete is somebody who plays a sport on a regular basis on purpose. And you are, if you're playing pickleball 2 or 3 times a week, every week, you're an athlete, whether you think of yourself as an athlete or not. And one of the things that distinguishes athletes from other people is they prepare.
Yes.
And so think about that you are an athlete. And one other thing, Janet, do you want to ask Steve the 2 questions, or do you want me to do it? Why don't you do it?
Well, we always ask our guests 2 questions about being oldish. And one is, what excites you about being oldish, and what is scary for you about being oldish?
What excites me about being oldish is that I have arrived at this time of my life, and I would say pretty much on a daily basis, I'm a happy, positive person, even when faced with challenges, and that I have somehow matured into a pretty consistently loving and helpful person. And that when my buttons get pushed and something arises within me, that it quickly goes back to, so I'm happy with being mature and being open-hearted. I love that. I love this time of my life for that. I love that I can love many people, that I love people just for friends. Unless someone gives me a reason to dislike them actively, I pretty much like everybody because, we all have our unique gifts. We're all unique souls traveling through life. I embrace Robin Williams. My favorite quote from him, who, of course, he died of an unfortunate dementia, but that every single person you meet has some kind of struggle that they're dealing with that you know nothing about. And I always bear that in mind, when being with people and meeting people. And in terms of scaring me, I wouldn't say that I feel fear. And like I said, I'm never too cavalier about how I will deal with things because you don't know until you're in it. There's nothing immediately confronting me right now. So I don't feel any particular fears. I do feel a sense of urgency, like I want to make the best use of my time. I don't want to waste time. I don't want to spend my emotional energy on things that don't matter, or, I try to contribute positively, but there's so many things that are out of my control. I try not to waste too much. I obviously have concerns like we all do about the nature of reality right now in politics and in the world and what's happening. I stay informed, but I don't squander my ability to be effective by spending too much energy on things that I have no control over, So
Thank
that's
you.
me.
Yep, that's you. Thanks.
That's all good.
I appreciate the work that you guys are doing. I do. I think
Thank you, Steve.
you're doing significant work and it matters.
Well, thanks.
Thank you.
We certainly appreciate hearing that. When I was thinking about preventing pickleball injuries, the thing that came first to my head was don't back up.
Oh,
I've seen
yes. Oh, yeah.
If somebody hits the ball over your head, do not back up to get it. Turn sideways and kind of shuffle your way back, or turn and run and then turn again. I've seen so many people step backwards and their heel rolls and they fall on the back of their head. And it's hard to fall properly if you're falling backwards on a pickleball court. Sideways, you can roll. But falling backwards, it's hard to move.
Yeah. It's actually called a drop. It's called a drop step. There's a specific step you do where you kind of rotate sideways and drop back. I don't know if you played basketball when you were younger, but it's right out of basketball. Oh, yeah. It's a drop step and then you run back to get it. Yeah. And it's funny, you have to train that one. And interestingly, because I was an avid basketball player for many, many years, I played at an over 40 league in Los Angeles for 13 years. I know the drop step all very well. And yet somehow, unless you drill it specifically in pickleball, you need to drill it so that it kind of gets into you, because even now I'll find myself backing up again, So a friend of mine and I were talking about that this morning. It's like, yeah, you got to drill this thing so it's in you.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate you joining us, and I wish you the best. I can tell you're a great coach just from the way you were talking about how to think about playing as an oldish person.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Gregg.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. It's been great. Thanks, Janet. A pleasure to hang out with you as always.
Same to you, Gregg.
Okay.
Till next time.
Be well, both of you.
Till next time. Okay. Thank you, Steve.
Bye, Steve. Thanks.
All righty. Bye-bye.
That's it for now. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Steve Raymond for joining us on the courts. We'll have links in the show notes to some of the people Steve mentioned. Be safe out there. You can leave comments on this or other episodes at www.oldish.me. If you like what you heard today, please tell a friend. and rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Our next episode will be our first anniversary episode. Janet and I will take a look back and a look forward as we head into our second year. Please join us. It will always be true that the most fun I ever had playing pickleball was just us hitting the ball back and forth and laughing on the little court next to the library with the river flowing by and the eagles wheeling overhead.